At my daughter's wedding, she looked me in the eyes and said, "Leave, you don't belong here." Hey guys, before we start today's video, I need your help. I have noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best. The way that you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thank you very much. Let's go back to the video. I arrived at the wedding venue 2 hours early. The sun was bright, and laughter floated through the air like the scent of the blooming flowers lining the garden archway. I stood there for a while, watching the crew arrange flowers, chairs, and the table where the wedding cake was being delicately constructed. I had envisioned this day countless times ever since Lily was born, but not once in my imagination did I expect to feel so out of place. Everyone buzzed around me with purpose, and yet I felt like a shadow, moving through a memory that wasn't mine anymore. I caught glimpses of family and friends arriving, exchanging hugs and warm smiles, but no one looked at me twice. I found a quiet corner and adjusted my tie, watching as Lily walked out in her bridal gown. Her dress flowed like it belonged in a fairy tale, and my heart swelled with love and pride. Then, her eyes met mine for a fleeting second. They didn't hold joy. They didn't hold warmth. They held something else, something distant. I took a step forward, almost instinctively, as if to hug her or tell her how beautiful she looked, but she turned away before I could open my mouth. A tight knot formed in my stomach. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was nervous. It's her big day. Brides are allowed to be overwhelmed. I convinced myself of that and stayed put, smiling, faintly, silently rehearsing my speech for the reception, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right, and I wasn't prepared for what came next. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and glasses clinked in celebration, I made my way toward Lily. She stood near the stage, surrounded by her new in-laws. I reached her and said softly, "You look stunning." She turned to me slowly. Her smile faded, and in a voice so quiet yet so sharp, she said, "Leave, you don't belong here." My world shattered in an instant. I froze. Surely, I'd misheard her. I blinked, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was a joke, but her face remained still, cold, distant. There was no jest in her tone. No hesitation, only finality. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I searched her eyes for an explanation, a trace of the girl I raised, but found only a stranger in a white dress. Behind me, I heard a hush fall over a few nearby guests. A waiter walked by, slowing down, sensing tension. I swallowed hard, willing myself to stay composed. "Lily, what are you saying?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Her jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "This day isn't yours to witness." My legs felt weak, my chest heavy. I didn't understand. Just last week, we had spoken over the phone briefly, but nothing was out of the ordinary. Or so I thought. She hadn't invited me herself. The invite had come through a forwarded email from her mother, my ex. I assumed it was just awkwardness. But now, standing there, I realized it might have been intentional. I looked around. No one stepped in. No one defended me. No one asked what was going on. I felt invisible, unwanted. I took a step back, nodding, slowly, trying to maintain dignity even as my heart cracked. "All right," I said. "If that's what you want." I turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. I could feel eyes on my back, whispers following me like shadows. I made it to the parking lot before the first tear escaped. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trembling. I had raised her. I had sacrificed. I had given everything. And in the end, I didn't belong at her happiest moment. I was erased, unwelcome, discarded like I had never mattered at all. I drove aimlessly for hours, my hands shaking every time I replayed her words in my head. "Leave. You don't belong here." Over and over, it echoed like a broken record in a room with no exit. I ended up in a park I hadn't visited in years, the same one where I used to push her on the swings and pack little peanut butter sandwiches for our afternoon picnics. I sat on a bench, surrounded by families and laughter, a painful contrast to the hollow silence inside me. I watched a father chase his daughter with giggles trailing behind them, and I remembered Lily's laughter, how she used to squeal with joy when I spun her in circles, how she'd fall asleep on my chest, how she used to say I was her hero. What had changed? Was I blind? Did I miss the signs? My mind spiraled through 1,000 moments: birthdays, school plays, scraped knees, graduation. All of it felt like a lie now, or maybe just one-sided. I couldn't understand how I had gone from hero to ghost. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our last messages. Nothing that indicated this. No anger, no conflict, just distance. I thought she was just growing up, busy with work, busy planning the wedding. I never imagined I was being phased out. I started typing a message, something long, something emotional, but my fingers hovered over the send button. What would it change? She had made herself clear, painfully clear. Still, I couldn't let it rest. I needed answers. I needed closure. I called her. It rang twice before going to voicemail. I left no message. She wouldn't listen anyway. I knew her well enough to know that when she closed a door, she didn't peek back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, haunted by memories, and that final look she gave me. I didn't belong. Why? What had I done? My mind wandered. To my divorce with her mother? It was messy, yes, but I always tried to keep Lily out of it. I never spoke badly about her mom. I paid support. I showed up. I was there. Was it not enough? Had someone poisoned her against me? Had I missed something crucial? I needed to know. I needed to hear it from her. So, the next morning, I drove to her apartment. I hadn't been there in months, but I remembered the address from when she first moved in. I stood at her door with my heart pounding, unsure if I was about to make things better or worse. I knocked. No answer. I waited. Knocked. Again. Still silence. Then the door opened just slightly and her roommate peered out. "She's not here," she said flatly. "She said you might come." I swallowed hard. Did she say why she asked me to leave the wedding? Her roommate shrugged. She didn't want drama. Said it was for the best. For the best, I echoed, my voice cracking. I'm her father. She looked uncomfortable. Maybe it's not my place, but she's been angry for a while. Something about how you abandoned her. I don't know the details. Abandoned. I stood there, stunned. That wasn't true, not even close. But perception is powerful. And maybe someone had rewritten the story in her mind. I left without saying another word. The pain I felt was deep. Not just of rejection, but of betrayal, of being misunderstood, of being turned into a villain in the life I had poured my soul into. That word abandoned echoed in my ears. Like a gavel slamming down on a courtroom bench. It didn't matter what the truth was anymore. If that's what she believed, then in her world, I had already been tried, convicted, and sentenced. I drove home with my vision blurry from the tears I refused to let fall. Memories of our life, together flashed in fragmented scenes, bedtime stories, math homework at the kitchen table, her first driving lesson, the look on her face when she got accepted into college. I was there. I was always there. I even remembered sitting outside her dorm on that rainy night, freshman year when she had called crying after a breakup just needing someone. I brought her soup, stayed on the phone with her until she fell asleep. How could all of that vanish into one word abandon? That night, I sat in the living room alone, surrounded by silence and old photos that now felt like strangers. I didn't eat, I didn't move, I didn't know what to do next. There was no manual for being unwanted by your child. I could barely breathe without the ache of wondering where I had gone wrong. The next day, I called her mother. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but I needed answers. Why did she tell me to leave? I asked, my voice brittle. There was a pause, then a sigh. You showing up without being invited didn't help, she said sharply. I thought the forwarded invite meant I was welcome. It wasn't from her, it was from me. I thought she'd change her mind. She didn't. Want you there? Not after what happened. I frowned. What happened? What are you talking about? You were never around, and when you were, it was on your terms, she snapped. You missed birthdays, weekends. I was working. I was trying to provide. You know that. Providing isn't parenting, she replied coldly. She needed you emotionally, not just financially. Her words cut through me like ice. Maybe she believed it. Maybe Lily did too. But that wasn't the truth, not from my side. I tried. God, I tried. I made mistakes, sure, but I was always present in the way I knew how to be. But now, none of that mattered. My version of the story didn't count. I was already erased. I hung up and stared at the ceiling for hours, my chest tight with helplessness. Days passed, then a week. I didn't call, I didn't text. I let the silence grow between us like a canyon that couldn't be crossed. Until one afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, from Lily. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The first line read, "You probably hate me now, but I needed to say this." I sat down, holding my breath, and began to read. Her handwriting was familiar in it, a little slanted, with tiny hearts still dotting her eyes. It brought back the image of little Lily scribbling birthday cards with crayon. But now, the words she wrote weren't childish. They were heavy, painful, real. I know what I said was cruel, she wrote, and maybe unforgivable. But you need to know that I didn't say it out of hate. I said it out of hurt. I paused, my hands trembling slightly. She continued, "For years, I carried this idea of what you were supposed to be. My protector, my supporter, my rock, and for a long time, you were that. But then you weren't, you drifted, you got busy, you were married, you had another life. And I felt like I was no longer part of it." I swallowed hard. The words pierced, like arrows. I remember waiting for your calls on birthdays that came late or not at all. I remember school plays where I scanned the crowd hoping to see you, only to find an empty seat where you were supposed to be. I didn't know how to ask why. I just started believing it didn't matter to you. My throat tightened. She had remembered all the things I tried to forget, the moments I missed, the promises broken by work emergencies or delayed flights. I told myself they were unavoidable. She remembered them as abandonment. I know Mom probably told you I was angry. The letter continued. I was, but more than that, I was sad. I kept asking myself why I wasn't enough for you to stay. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it, and when I saw you at the wedding, part of me wanted to hug you. But a louder part, Wanted you to feel what I had felt all these years, to feel like you didn't belong, to feel the ache of being left out. The letter ended with, I don't know if we can fix this, but I needed you to understand. Because maybe if you do, maybe we can start over, or at least, start talking. I sat there for hours, the letter clutched in my hands, her voice replaying in my head through every line. She didn't hate me, she was hurt. She didn't want revenge, she wanted to be seen. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The next morning, I stood outside a little cafe near the park where I used to take her when she was a child. I held the letter in my coat pocket and my phone in my hand, staring at her contact for what felt like eternity. Finally, I typed, I read your letter. I hear you. Would you meet me at the old cafe? Same booth. I hit send before I could overthink it. Minutes ticked by like hours. Then the screen lit up. Okay. My heart raced with a strange mix of fear and hope. I got there early. Chose our usual corner booth where she used to order hot chocolate with 3 marshmallows and the waiter brought water. I checked my phone every 30 seconds. Then, finally, she walked in. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, her face calm but unreadable. She walked toward me slowly, cautiously, and I stood to greet her. Hi, I said. Hi, she replied softly. We sat in silence for a few seconds before I placed the letter gently on the table. Thank you for writing that, I said. It hurt to read, but I needed to hear it. She nodded. I wasn't sure you'd even respond. I didn't. No, you felt all that, I admitted. I never meant to make you feel invisible, Lily, I thought. I was doing what I had to do to support you. She looked down at her hands. Support isn't always about money. I know that now, I said quietly. I was wrong to think my presence could be replaced by paychecks and occasional visits. She sighed. You missed so many big moments, and even when you were there it felt like part of you wasn't. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I was trying to rebuild my life after the divorce, but I see now I should have included you more in that life. I thought giving you space was what you needed. I didn't want space, she said. I wanted my dad. That line broke me. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. I'm here now, not perfect. Not asking you to forget everything, but I'm asking for a chance to be better moving forward. She didn't speak for a moment, then she nodded. Just once, but it was enough. We sat there for hours, talking, crying, laughing in bits. It wasn't a fix, but it was a beginning. A fragile, tender beginning. That in the weeks that followed our meeting at the cafe, the silence that had once suffocated our relationship began to unravel, replaced by careful conversations and guarded honesty. We didn't pretend things hadn't happened. We didn't brush pain under the rug, but we began to talk about it, slowly, tentatively. There were moments when our calls ended in silence, and others where we laughed over childhood memories or shared what we were eating for dinner. I didn't try to rush her forgiveness, and she didn't expect me to be perfect. We gave each other space to be flawed, human, and real. She told me about the parts of her childhood I'd missed, school performances, where she looked into the audience for a familiar face, the day she got her driver's license and wished I was there to take a picture. I listened. I didn't make excuses. I simply told her I was sorry, and I meant it with every breath. One evening, she sent me a photo of her, in her wedding dress, standing in front of the mirror alone, taken just before she walked down the aisle. I wish you could have seen this, she texted. I replied, I see it now, and you're stunning. It wasn't just a compliment, it was a bridge. A few days later, she asked me to come over. Her husband Daniel was polite, a little reserved, but I didn't expect anything more than civility. We had dinner, and though the air still felt delicate, there was no tension, just an awareness that this was new territory for all of us. After dinner, Lily and I sat outside on the porch. She looked up at the sky and asked, Do you ever wish you could go back? I nodded. Every day, not to change everything, just to pay more attention? She smiled faintly. I think we're doing that now, and she was right. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about showing up in the present with open hands and open hearts. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, we were walking it together, not as strangers trying to make sense of a broken bond, but as a father and daughter rediscovering what love looks like when it's honest, raw, and still willing to try. 2 months after that dinner, I received another envelope in the mail. This time it wasn't handwritten, it was a professionally printed photo book. The cover said, Moments You Missed. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of whether this would be a gift or another wound. But as I turned the pages, I felt tears welling in my eyes, not of pain, but of gratitude. Each page held pictures of Lily growing up, her 3rd grade science fair, her junior prom, her first college dorm. Alongside each picture was a short note. This was the day I won first. Place I wanted to call you. I tried this dress on 3 times before picking it. I wished you could see me. I cried the first night in my dorm. I slept hugging the teddy bear you gave me. I read every word like scripture, my hands trembling as I turned each page. Near the end was a photo of her in her wedding gown, smiling into the camera. Underneath, the caption read, You weren't there that day, but this is how I wanted you to remember me. And on the final page, a note in her handwriting. There's still time for new moments, if you're willing to make them. I closed the book and held it to my chest. overwhelmed by a feeling I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Hope. That night, I called her, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider calling in. I felt like I belonged. We planned our first weekend trip, just the two of us. A hiking trail we used to visit when she was small. She warned me she wasn't as fit as she used to be. I laughed and said I'd probably be the one needing breaks. We spent that day talking, walking, and pausing to take silly selfies. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. It was already behind us, and what lay ahead was more important. The future we were choosing, together. We ended the day sitting on a rock by the stream, watching the water flow endlessly, steadilized like time. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm glad you didn't give up." I replied, "I never will." Things weren't perfect, and I didn't expect them to be. There were still moments when I'd say something and see her stiffen slightly, reminded of old disappointments. And there were times when she'd speak cautiously, afraid of triggering another silence. But what made it different now was that we didn't run from those moments. We talked through them. We respected the bruises without poking them. I learned how to show up not just physically, but emotionally. I'd ask about her work, listen without trying to fix, and share parts of my own life she never knew. Like how I used to keep her artwork in my office drawer, even after she'd grown up, or how I'd reread her childhood letters whenever I missed her too much. She laughed when I told her about the time I cried in my car during her wedding. "You're such a softie," she teased. "Always have been," I admitted. Daniel warmed up to me, slowly. I never forced a bond, we let it grow naturally. And one day, over coffee, he said, "I can see where she gets her resilience." It was the first time I felt acknowledged, not just tolerated. That meant everything. I helped them move to a new apartment, painted walls with Daniel, and built bookshelves with Lily. We ordered greasy pizza, watched old comedies, and laughed like we hadn't missed a decade of memories. She began tagging me in photos again. Dad and I fixed a shelf. One caption read, "He still can't hold a paintbrush straight." Another joked. I treasured each one. My favorite was a candid she posted of us at the park, me laughing, her looking at me like she did when she was little, before life complicated everything. The caption simply read, "Coming home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person." That photo now sits framed on my shelf. Every morning I glance at it before heading out, reminding myself that healing isn't an endpoint, it's a practice, a choice, one I'll keep making, every day. Months continued to pass, but this time, the seasons didn't feel like they were leaving me behind. I was part of her world again, not in a grand or dramatic way, but in the simple, consistent rhythms of life. The phone calls about mundane things, surprise visits on weekends, shared meals without any emotional landmines. It was the quiet rebuilding of something that had once been sacred and was now becoming strong again, not by forgetting the past, but by learning from it. One afternoon, she called me and asked if I wanted to join her and Daniel for a charity fundraiser their company was organizing. It was the first public event she had invited me to in years. I said yes without hesitation, but inside I was nervous. Would there be judgment? Would anyone look at me like I didn't belong, the way she once had? But when we arrived, she introduced me with warmth and confidence. "This is my dad," she said, smiling. "He's the reason I know how to speak to a crowd without trembling." I smiled, caught off guard by the compliment, and when I took my seat at the back of the hall, I watched her speak at the podium, elegant, articulate, commanding the room. I clapped louder than anyone when she finished, and when she sat back down, she gave me a small nod, the kind that said, "I saw you." That evening, as we left the event and got in the car, she asked, "Were you proud?" I laughed. I've never stopped being proud, not for a second. She looked out the window for a while, then whispered, "I'm proud of you too, for coming back." I didn't know what to say to that. No words could capture the feeling of being seen again, not just as a father but as a man who had fought and still chose to stand. That night, something shifted. It was like the final piece of a long and complicated puzzle quietly slipped into place. There was no fanfare, no dramatic music, just a sense of peace. She had forgiven me not in a single moment, but through many moments, layered with honesty, accountability, and love. And I had forgiven myself too. That was the hardest part. For years, I carried shame like armor, thinking, if I bore enough guilt, it would somehow balance the scales. But guilt doesn't heal wounds, it only deepens them. Love does the healing. Presence. The daily choosing to show up even when you're scared of being rejected again. It's in the little things, remembering a detail from her day, showing up early instead of on time, leaving notes on her fridge when I drop off leftovers, telling her I'm proud even when she rolls her eyes. All those things add up. One Sunday, we were walking through a bookstore, something we used to do when she was in high school, and she pointed to a worn copy of a parenting book. "Think you need a refresher course?" she joked. I smiled and said, "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just starting chapter 2. She picked up the book and handed it to me. "Then start here," she said. It was a silly moment, playful, but it meant everything. She wasn't just including me in her life. Again, she was letting me laugh with her, tease her, stand beside her, no longer a ghost from the past, but a father present in the now. I kept that book. Didn't read it, but I kept it because it marked something profound. Not a fix, but a beginning. A year later, something happened that caught me completely off guard. She called me late one evening, her voice uncertain but steady. "Dad, I have something to tell you," she said. "I'm pregnant." I sat up straight, not out of panic, but surprise and joy. "Are you serious?" I asked, unable to stop the smile forming. "Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything yet, but I want you to be part of it, from the start." Those words landed deeper than she knew. I whispered, "Thank you." And she said, "You missed a lot before. I don't want you to miss this." In that moment, everything, the years of silence, the painful wedding rejection, the buried resentment melted into a single, beautiful truth. We had found our way back. Over the following months, I was involved in every step: doctor's appointments, ultrasound viewings, helping paint the nursery, assembling the crib. We joked about names, and she teased that if it was a boy, maybe he'd get my stubbornness. When the baby shower came, she stood beside me and introduced me to everyone with warmth and pride. "This is my dad," she said, hand resting on her belly. "He'll probably spoil this baby more than anyone." And I knew she meant it. I even got a framed invitation to the shower that said to Grandpa in gold lettering. I held it like a medal of honor, knowing what it took for us to get here. The day her daughter, my granddaughter, was born, I was sitting outside the delivery room, heart pounding, memories flooding me. I thought of the day Lily herself was born, how I held her tiny frame and promised I'd always protect her, and even though I failed her in ways I never intended, we found our way back to that promise, together. When Daniel stepped out and said, "She's here," I burst into tears before I even saw the baby. Minutes later, they let me in. I walked in carefully, as if the air itself was sacred. Lily looked exhausted but radiant. She held a tiny bundle in her arms, wrapped in pink and humming gently in her sleep. "Meet Ava," she said. I stepped closer, heart full to the brim, and whispered, "Hi Ava, I'm your grandpa." My voice cracked. Lily looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I want her to know you, the real you." I reached out and held the baby, her fingers wrapping around mine, so small yet so certain. And in that moment, everything changed. I didn't feel like the man who had once been asked to leave. I didn't feel like the outsider who didn't belong. I felt like a father. I felt like a grandfather. I felt redeemed. Because love, no matter how fractured, always has the power to rebuild. Always. You just have to be brave enough to come back when you're called, even if the call doesn't come with words, but with a quiet hope that maybe you still belong.